Well, hello everybody, I'm Rachel. I'm a project manager in the Makerspace. We're based in Newton Building. And today we're taking over this session with a Make It Matter, which is our event series, Make It Matter, just like here. So usually we'd run these sessions at the actual Makerspace with pizza and beers, and it's all very nice, but obviously we can't do that. So this is going to be our first online session, which we're quite excited about. We've got some excellent speakers for you today. So you'll know because you're here, and we're going to be talking about digital waste, and Gerry McGovern's here as well. Gerry has published 8 books, all of them focus on digital content, and his latest book is called Worldwide Waste: How Digital is Killing the Planet and What to Do About It, and that's an excellent book. I've read it. I've heard him speak before. He's an excellent and inspiring speaker, so I think you're really going to enjoy it. Then after that, we'll have some questions. So if you're comfortable with putting questions in the chat, then I can feed them back to Gerry, or if you want to put your hand up, then that's fine too, it's up to you. And then after that, we'll have Beck Bennett. Beck works as the Head of Environmental Sustainability here at Salford, and she's really passionate about reducing Salford's operational environmental impact. So she's going to be talking about what we do about digital waste here at Salford as well. So I think we can all agree that it's going to be an interesting conversation. So I'll hand over to Gerry, and let's get started.
Okay, Rachel, thank you very much. Oh, and I just shared the screen, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. Is the screen sharing?
Yep, it's sharing. I can see it.
Okay, good. And I'm going to turn the camera off for a little while, just to, I don't know if it's gone off, but sure, we'd see. So what I'm going to cover today is an audit I'm developing called the Digital Waste Audit, based on the book that Rachel mentioned, Worldwide Waste. And there are kind of 3 components of this audit. It's targeted at helping organizations reduce their digital waste, and in general in society reducing digital waste. And the first is the e-waste component. So most of us will be somewhat familiar with e-waste, old phones and old computers. And this is growing at a phenomenal pace. Currently around the world is estimated about 54 million tons of e-waste being produced every year, and that rising to about 70 million tons. And only 20% of it, or even less often, is recycled. And some of the recycling is what you see here. Oftentimes we ship our waste from rich countries to poor countries, and this is what actually happens. The stuff gets burned to get out some of the metals or stuff like that. So the state of actual recycling in the digital environment is extremely poor and very negative, particularly on poorer countries. So there's these concepts called urban mining that almost as much of some of these what are called rare earth materials now in existence in our old phones than there are in the earth. And actually mining for those often destabilizes habitats of rare animals like the western lowland gorillas, etc. So we are killing rare species in order to get our next iPhone, or to get the rare earth material for our iPhones, where if we did recycle properly, we could get a lot of those materials out of the phones. Unfortunately, most organizations, tech organizations, deliberately create their products so they cannot be recycled easily and properly, so for all sorts of reasons, with specialist glues, unique phones. So they design them so they can't be repaired and they can't be basically recycled. We used to have circular economies before modern technology. With the rise of modern technology, we've gone further and further away from circular economies. And why does all this matter? Well, because whenever you buy that laptop or you buy the computer, 80% of the CO2 that the total life of that product will create has already been created. So because technological products are very high intensity in their manufacture, they create an awful lot of waste, an awful lot of energy, etc. Use a lot of energy in their manufacture. So the single greatest thing you can leave this session with is hold on to your devices as long as is humanly possible, and when they break, repair them, because the longer you can hold on to them, it has a huge impact. However, having said that, The second area is the data explosion, which of course the data demands the devices. We need more servers, etc. in the process. And we are creating data at a speed that is beyond imagination. In the last 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, we have created more data than in all of civilization in human history. We are now into zettabytes of data. To print out 1 zettabyte of data would take 20 trillion trees. There are about 3 trillion trees on the planet at the moment. By 2035, there'll be about 2,000 zettabyte of data. To store 2,000 zettabyte of data using current storage devices would take $58 trillion to buy those storage devices. The global economy is worth about $80 trillion. So you get a sense of the absolute explosion. And 90% of this is crap. I've spent the last 25 years working in this industry, working with all sorts of organizations, and 90% of the data we create is crap, never gets used 2 or 3 months after it's created. As humans, we have a fabulous capacity to create crap, particularly when it comes to digital. So we are destroying the world with data and with e-devices, and we're not actually getting much in return. And the third area where digital is a negative driver, and this is even bigger actually in many ways than the other two, is that digital accelerates the worst in human behavior in many ways. Our bad habits, our desire for convenience, our desire for stuff that is quick and fast and easy and disposable. You could not have fast fashion without digital. Digital speeds everything up, and humans are not designed to behave beyond certain speeds. So you couldn't have the fast fashion industry without Instagram culture. You couldn't have, we have gone from 2 seasons a year in fashion to 24 seasons a year within 20 years. You could not do that without the MacBook. So behind the scenes, digital is driving a lot of the worst in human behavior, as we see in the social media spaces, etc. Sometimes it drives good behavior, but the base behavior that digital is driving is convenience and disposability and this I want it now type of culture. So how do we begin to address those core issues, those often hidden issues? Because digital and the tech industry is wonderful at hiding the dark side of what it does. And how do we get away and get to a better environment? Most of my career has been in what might be called user experience or usability or that area. And we always used to think we had found a kind of the nirvana of design if you design for the user rather instead of the organization or instead of for the designer. But I think we need to think beyond in our design decisions now, or whatever decisions, and look at the earth experience. And we need to factor in the cost to the earth of the decisions that we are making when we create this data or buy this thing, this toxic device, which will poison the earth for another 500 years. So we use it for 2 years and it destroys life that is connected with it for the next 500 years. Doesn't seem like a good decision. So this is about earth experience. So then the digital waste audit, how do we look at organizations and look at the ones that are on the right path or on the wrong path? So there's 4 areas that we are examining within organizations. One is the culture. What is the right culture to actually drive a more environmentally friendly set of behaviors? Then how do we deal with our devices, our websites? How do we manage our websites, and how do we manage our communication in the process? So I'm going to briefly look at these 4 areas. So these are 4 areas of focus in our audit. And culture drives everything. Culture drives everything. If we don't get the attitudes and the culture right, forget about the technology. It's irrelevant. So one of the key hopeful trends in modern culture is the rise of collaboration. This is a chart of scientific publishing over the last 100 years. And basically we see that more and more scientific papers have multiple publishers. The average now is about 5 per publication. There are some scientific papers that have thousands of people involved in the publication. So what we have found over the years is that collaborative activity tends to reduce waste. And I'm going to explain that in a moment, and particularly multidisciplinary collaborative activity. Because often what you find when you bring silos together is that they realized that significant elements of duplication in core activities, that there are certain unique aspects within a silo, but there are many common things that are done across silos, and often those things end up being duplicated. So whereas multidisciplinary collaboration is messy to achieve, it tends to create less waste in the creation of systems, in the creation of data, etc. So we're driving and trying to promote multidisciplinary environments and team-based environments. Also shifting the reward model within organizations. This is something that Microsoft is trying to do. Currently, the vast majority of organizations that I have come across reward you for what you create, for what you do. So looking at shifting the reward model for individuals, for staff and employees, etc., that we reward people for what they create, because the problem today is creativity. We create too much stuff. You know, we create and we use too much stuff, and particularly we create and use too much short-term stuff, too much stuff that, you know, imagine if your child was there, you know, and you were walking down the street and your neighbor says, "Oh, how old is your child?" And they said, you said 2. And you said, "Oh, you need to be getting rid of them now. They're very old, aren't they?" You know, how come something that 2 is old? But if your phone is 2, it's old. How twisted we have become because of marketing and planned obsolescence. So we have this whole culture of digital creates this addiction of creation. So how do we shift that culture away from just creation to sharing? Because if there's value in what you've created, you'll need to be able to share it and reward people who have shared, so other people have used what you've created and that you reuse. So the triumvirate measure from a HR resources are looking at people. What have you created? What have you shared? And what have you reused? And that we praise people as much for reuse as we praise people for creativity. Today we have a cult of creativity. Please break out of that cult of creativity, because if you younger generation don't break out, we are totally ruined for the future. So I want to give you a very little brief look at this idea in action. Years ago, we did this work. My core activity for the last 15 years is a kind of a research method called Top Tasks. And it's about identifying what really matters in an environment. So we did it for the Norwegian Cancer Society back in 2012, asking citizens, what really matters to you in relation to dealing with cancer? The number 1 thing was treatment, number 2 was symptoms, number 3, prevention, research. These were the core tasks, the things that really mattered to people. And what was at the bottom of the list? You see 6 tasks get as much of the vote as the bottom 45. What was at the bottom of the list? Loads of things to do with donation, giving money to the Norwegian Cancer Society. Now, at that stage, their homepage was full of requests to please give us money, please donate money, etc., etc. When they saw this data, they said, "Oh, that's not so good. We're disconnected from our audience and what they want to do." And at that stage, they had 5,000 pages and they had 45 people actually contributing, most of them just on a part-time 5 or 10% of their time. So they decided that they'd follow the top tasks approach, and they'd really focus on treatment and the core tasks as the essence of the website. One of the first steps to do that was they got rid of these 45 people. It's a disaster. Distributed publishing today, yesterday, tomorrow, etc. in organizations is disastrous. Always has been, always will be, but techie geeks and IT departments love it. Small teams of professionals if you want quality and you want to reduce waste and you want to do all sorts of good things. So they went from 45 people creating bits and pieces of content in a part-time basis to much more semi-permanent people. And one of the key things was they had to collaborate. They'd meet every Monday. So the people from the cancer section would meet with the fundraising, and then they'd liaise with the experts within the organization. Things that they began to discover was duplication of descriptions of the core cancers. So the basically fundraising team is, oh, we're doing something on skin cancer. Let's write a definition for skin cancer. They'd never think to reuse the definition that already exists in the cancer section and in the research section, etc. So they found all sorts of duplicative content across their website. Smaller teams collaborating across disciplines. They went to 1,000 pages from 5,000 pages, so 80% deletion of actual content. And what happened? Their annual income doubled in years to come because their website was simpler, more focused, less confusing duplication, etc. in the process. So generally, collaborative driven cultures that are sharing and reusing create better outcomes and are less wasteful in their side effects. So devices. What do we do about devices? I said earlier, you hold on to your devices as long as possible. The perfect storm is a digital device, because digital devices have very high energy intensity in their manufacturing, and they have a very short life cycle, and they're not designed to be recycled. In fact, they're deliberately designed so they cannot be recycled and repaired because whatever, people are greedy and they want short-term profits over the long-term sustainability of the planet. So if we hold on to our devices, a typical phone creates about 60 kg in manufacture, right? And requires, something like 12,000 liters of water to actually make. So if you hold on to your phone for 5 years versus getting rid of it at 2 years, you're down to 2,500 liters of water required per phone. And the carbon footprint from if you get rid of that phone at 2 years is 36 kg, but if you hold on to it, the phone, you've spread it out and it's 18 kg. So holding on to your devices is absolutely critical. It's the single most important thing you can do. Hold on to them for 10 years if you can at all possible. And we need to be much more demanding that these devices should last, rather than greedy companies like Apple and Samsung making mega profits of the destruction of the earth. Right, turning off our devices. They estimate in the US that about 20% of a typical electricity cost is due to leakage or due to what is called vampire power. So devices that are not being used but are actually on. A typical desktop at zero utilization is still consuming 100 watts of power. So still consuming 100 watts of power even when it's not being used. When it goes to 50% utilization, it's 180 watts. Up at 100%, it's 200 watts. Turn stuff off. If you're not using it, turn the screen off, turn stuff off. If we could do that systematically, it wouldn't hurt us. Yeah, keep it on when you're using it, but turn it off when you're using it. Plug stuff out at night. Plug stuff out. Even those phone chargers actually are sucking power even when they're plugged in. Forget about when your phone is in the process. So making the decisions of what you choose. Smaller screens are better. I used to have a big screen, I got rid of it. Now I just work off my laptop in the process. Desktops tend to be much less inefficient than laptops, because laptops are designed to exist with batteries. So they're designed to be much more efficient in their energy consumption. When you're streaming or transferring data, wired, ironically, you might not think so, is much more efficient than using wireless, and certainly 3 or 4G. 5G is an absolute disaster for the planet, by the way, despite all the fancy marketing. Transferring a video, an hour's worth of video, over a fiber optic cable, this was a German study, created 2 grams per hour of CO2. Over a copper cable was 4 grams, but if you transferred it over 3G, it was 90 grams. And 4G is more polluting than 3G, and 5G is a kind of 80 times more polluting than 3G. So the way you transfer, the means by which you choose to transfer data can have a significant impact on the actual amount of pollution that's actually created. So generally speaking, wired is better. Wi-Fi is about twice as polluting than wired. 3G is 15 times more than Wi-Fi, 4G is 23 times, and 5G is 80 times, creates 80 times more pollution than Wi-Fi, and 160 times more pollution than using a wired process. So be conscious of how you transfer data, how you store data. It is 3,000 times more polluting to store in the cloud than to store in your hard disk. The most optimal way to store a specific thing is on your hard disk. Obviously, if you have a large organization, there can be efficiencies of storage, etc., utilization, all sorts of things like that. But even in cloud land, there's a massive difference in the cost and the energy consumed by various types of storage. There's archival storage, there's cool storage, there's hot storage, and there's premium storage. And premium storage is a bit like your Dropbox and stuff like that. Now, premium storage is 150 times more polluting than archival storage. So if there's stuff that you're not using a lot, put it into an archive. Don't have it in the hot environment. So the way you store stuff has an impact on pollution as well. And it's only tiny impacts per individual. But most people just don't know this and just aren't aware of this. We filter our plastic and stuff in our bins, but we think that, digital is this endless free space. There's nothing free. If it's free, it costs the earth. For all sorts of reasons. Websites are atrocious. I've been building websites in 1996. They've got bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a massive obesity epidemic on the web because most web developers and designers are just lazy and couldn't care less. You can design a perfectly functional web page with 400 KB. That's a lot of weight, but the typical average page now is about 4 megabyte. So the two areas in digital of waste and use you need to be conscious of is the energy that's consumed in the production of the thing, but often far more energy is consumed in the use of the thing. So on the person's device, this is from Mozilla Firefox that create the Firefox browser. So they calculated all the waste they were creating on an annual basis from their offices, their coders, their designers, lightings, everything they did, right? And they calculated that of the total waste that they were responsible for, it was 2%, and that 98% of the waste created was in people using their browsers. So remember, your web page gets used, and that has an impact on people's devices. So what you create, you need to be cognizant of the energy demand that what you create has on the user, because that demand is often much, much bigger than your core demand. Video is atrocious. Video is a massive, massive polluter in comparison to text and other environments. So be careful of video. I'm not saying don't use video, but really think about using video. Optimization. These two images essentially look the same. Nobody can really see a difference, yet one of them is 40% lighter than the other. So there's all sorts of good optimization things where we can take weight out where it's not visible. There's techniques now called lazy loading where the image doesn't load until you scroll down the page. There are lots of techniques that we can do in our design processes that can be less energy intensive, both in the creation and in the use of the product. JavaScript has exploded in web design, gone from an average of 52 kilobyte to 370. There's no need. And often we use JavaScript to do things that HTML would do. Should always default to the lowest energy consuming language if you're doing a design. We over design, we lazily design so much. Custom fonts have exploded. Most people can't see the difference between these custom fonts. These custom fonts have increased by 850% between 2011 and 2018. Why? Because we can, because we think it's cool, etc. in the process. Finally, a little on communication, what we're doing here now, hopefully. A 1 hour call between two people. If you do it audio only, is 36 megabyte. Actually, if you do it over a landline, it's probably about 10 megabytes. Landline is far more efficient. Nobody has landlines anymore. It's interesting. We get rid of the efficient stuff to have the multi-purpose stuff. You do audio over the web, it's about 36 megabit of data, about 10 megabit of data over a standard phone. You do standard video, that's 270 megabyte. You do high definition video, it's 540 megabyte. You do ultra high definition, it's at least 1.3 gigabyte. These are conservative numbers actually chosen. So what's the lesson we take out of that? Well, start your conference with videos, so you see each other, do it for 3 or 4 minutes, and then say we'll go to audio or screen sharing or the process. If we did that at scale, you see the difference in 36 megabyte and 540 megabyte. Every megabyte creates pollution. Every megabyte less creates less pollution. It's all small steps can make a big difference. The most efficient way to communicate something is obviously if the person is there and you say it to them, shout it across the room. We can't do it so much today. But the next most efficient way, energy efficient way, is to send them an SMS. If an SMS creates 1 unit of CO2, then a typical email will create 285 units. An audio will create about 7,000 units of CO2, standard video 53,000, and a high definition video 81,000. So I just called to say thank you. You could say thank you by SMS. That would be much, much less polluting of the planet than ringing them up in high definition video. I just called to say thank you, bye. Right? You've created 81,000 units of pollution more than you could have created. Just sending emails, there's loads of, quantifying the amount of CO2. Are these absolutely accurate? This was Tim Berners-Lee's brother worked at, he did some excellent work. There's questions, but there's certainly, everything has a weight. Everything digital creates pollution because it's electrical, right? So very briefly, how we're carrying this out. We're doing management interviews, we're doing employee surveys, and a detailed website audit. So we're asking managers and companies about these issues, what's the culture, etc. in the process. The employee survey, well, what's your experience of this, and how do you feel overloaded by email, etc. So, and then there's a detailed audit looking at all sorts of stuff in their website or internet, how they're actually structured for organizing and architecting the actual environment. And the intent is that we calculate all this stuff together and people get a score for the amount of digital waste that they're actually creating. If they're doing a great job, they get an A. If they're doing a not so great job, they're getting an E. So that's I didn't have my timer here, so I hope I've stayed within the time. That's a quick overview of what we're trying to do with the digital waste audit, and open to questions and comments if there are any.
I've got a question, Gerry.
Yeah.
So before hearing you speak, I was really ignorant to the polluting influence of storage and websites or just calls. And how can we organizationally make that behavior change so we all know how polluting it is, and then and do something kind of at a strategic level or at an individual level? Do you have any tips?
It's a great question. I'm asking that question as well. I don't know really. This is an attempt to, we have our first client for this. Most of my work over the last 20 years has been in this more research area, top tasks and stuff like that. So it's only in the last 2 or 3 years I've been working in this space of digital, and I don't know the answer. I find that presenting this sort of stuff resonate, that, oh, I never knew using wired instead of Wi-Fi, that a lot of this stuff is just not known. So even being an evangelist about it is having an impact. So I'm hoping that when we go back and we say, listen, you don't need, your JavaScript is 5 times too big, and because you've got 70,000 people viewing your site every month, that's resulting in an extra 2 kg of CO2, unnecessary CO2, of wasteful CO2. So you've got JavaScript that has no purpose. It's just badly written, and it's causing stress in consumption, etc. So looking at all these issues and measuring them and reporting back to the organization and telling them, how many hours of high definition video, how many emails on average are being sent, what's the average size of the emails, how many attachments, A PDF, for example, I've done measurements, saving a piece of content on a PDF versus saving that same piece of content on a HTML page. A PDF can be up to 3 times heavier in weight. So giving digital a weight, because it does have weight. Everything that's electrical consumes energy. And digital is electrical. You switch the electricity off, you switch digital off. So digital inherently is dependent on energy. And everything that happens in digital has an energy cost. But most of us have not been aware of that energy cost because it's hidden. It's a hidden cost. And I think even making it visible, and just starting talking about these issues and the broader behavioral issues, because the biggest problem I think is in the behaviors that digital drives, the massive creation of stuff, that most of which never gets used, like the data. 90% of data is never used 3 months after it's created. So if we could stop all that wasteful, and think of all the effort, like Sarah Richards, who did great work with gov.uk, calculated that a typical piece of government content cost from anywhere to 2,000 to 8,000 euro just to create it. Sorry, 8,000 sterling just to create it, from management reviews, sign-offs, etc. in the process. We never calculate these things properly. So I think if we could begin to calculate and present this, that this is actually happening, and we need all hands on deck today to save the world. You know, not just, filtering the plastic. We need to be looking at every behavior that can in any way affect energy consumption, and try and do it in the best. We're not saying stop using your phone or stop. It's just stop wasting energy. I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, it definitely did. I think there's so much more that we can do in that area. Oh, there's another question in the chat. Just 1 second. Interesting to see the issues with email. Reply all is more than an annoyance. Do you think large organisations should incentivise the proper use of data, or should it be policed?
Well, I think the interesting thing is that in the vast majority of organizations I've been in, there is zero training to manage data, to manage content, to organize your laptop. I remember talking to a manager 20, 30 years ago that was about to retire, and he was saying to me, when he got his first promotion, he was sent on a 3-day course called How to Manage your filing cabinet. So he says, how do you manage files, and how do you manage filing cabinets? And then he said, when they introduced computers, they stopped that course. You know, that's the classic lie of computers. With a computer, you've got 50 filing cabinets. You know, you don't have one filing cabinet, you've got 50. Yet there's this assumption that we are all natural information architects. We are all wonderful at structure. No, we're not. We're wonderful at creating emails. Most of us are terrible at organizing content, and we get zero training on that, and zero skills are developed in that. And that is a massive hole in, modern organizational theory and modern organizational behavior. In fact, in my experience, information architecture and enterprise has been in decline, because the IA will do it, or there's always a new technology that will solve these difficult problems of organizing what we have and deciding what matters and what doesn't matter. Well, the IA won't do it. If you feed the artificial intelligence, the AI, the really bad data, you get really bad AI, as we're seeing in so many areas, that either prejudicial or otherwise. So humans seem to avoid at all cost difficult work. And difficult work is deleting and archiving, etc. And the technology industry has always waved this flag in front of us, says, no, you don't need to do that because we can store everything for you. So you don't need to think anymore. Well, actually, you do need to think, because us not thinking as a species is the key driver for why we're destroying the planet.
There's another comment in the chat. that says it would be helpful if we could have an email signature that says that we won't reply to say thanks because it's polluted and not because we're being rude or ignorant. Is that like something that you find?
Yeah, I mean, these are,
taking on board?
I mean, the replying to say thank, sometimes it's a good thing, and you don't want these sorts of social, but replying to say thanks and leaving a 16 screen thread in the email, don't do that. And don't forward mega attachments. Like the replying to say thanks, don't send unnecessary emails, but sometimes it's nice to be nice. And, you don't want to behave in an impolite way, obviously these issues, but there's a lot more we can do, like link to stuff, don't send attachments, link to stuff and get rid of long threads, and reply just and cut and paste out, so be cognizant of the weight of everything you do in digital. And sometimes you won't reply, and that's fine. Don't CC if you don't have to. Don't forward. There's loads of small behaviors. And you know what? We'd make the world a better place for everybody if we said, because everyone's drowning in too much stuff, they just don't want to admit it. In the process, in many ways, this sort of change would actually be good for us. It would be good for us as organizations. You saw in the Norwegian Cancer Society when they went from 5,000 pages to 1,000 pages and really focused on those 1,000 pages, their donations doubled because they were doing a better job for people. Quality, not quantity. So constantly cognizant of the weight of what you're doing and trying to reduce that weight. And weight is kbs, megabytes. It's all small impacts, but it scales up. But the bigger behaviors is, why do we need this app in the first place? Can't we do this with HTML? Can't we do this in the website? Why do we need a chatbot? Most chatbots suck. They're atrocious, and chatbots are tremendously processing intensive, can take up 25 to 50% of JavaScript processing, which can add 5 to 6 seconds of processing onto a typical phone. And we have chatbots that don't work, annoy the hell out of people, and are destroying the planet. And they're there because, hey, we're cool, we've got a chatbot, it annoys people, but it's a chatbot, and everybody has a chatbot. Why do we have to be such copyists of bad behaviors? Let's move away from the cult of volume that we have been trapped into by easy creative tools, the tools that allow us to create crap so easily. Let's create less, but of a higher quality.
There's another question here. It says, during the pandemic, there are so many shifts to digital services, leading to new business transformation. How can we balance the advance of technology with saving our planet from such e-waste produced?
Yeah, and this is an interesting, so everyone says, yeah, it's much better than driving in the car, going to the supermarket. Generally speaking, absolutely yes, right. But returns in e-commerce tend to be 3 to 4 times higher than in traditional commerce. About half of returns never even get resold again. So there's a lot of hidden problems below the surface. If we want 24-hour delivery, that's much more energy intensive than waiting a week because the truck will be less optimized, etc. So there are ways of looking at these areas and saying, yes, this is better than flying. But there was one study done in the UK last year that says people were driving, even in the pandemic, they were driving just as much as when they drove to work. It's just they're driving different places now. So if we're doing our meetings online and we're still driving as much as we ever driven, it's got worse in the process. So, technology gives this myth of it's all better because it's a lot of hidden, and sometimes it is, but we really need to think about these issues a lot more. And how do we reduce e-commerce returns, these sorts of challenge? How do we design in a way that people don't return things? Because the compulsion is, it's easy to return. We make everything so easy. Look at the impacts with that Robinhood app, because it's free. It's but it's not free to invest in a stock. You get charged later on in the process. It just seems like it's free. So many of these free tools have a real hidden cost to them. Online advertising is by far the most destructive activity on the web. Online advertising is the oil industry of the web, and most of the core web services are driven by online advertising. Buy stuff. Subscribe to stuff if you really like stuff. Really review the stuff you use for free, because the earth's paying for it in a massive way because of the underpinning of online advertising. So yes, we embrace technology, but with a skeptical eye, and not just assuming that it's going to be better, and constantly questioning, is it actually better to do it using technology? Because in many situations, it's not the best option to actually choose. So we need to be just a lot more skeptical of the nice PR spins that we get from big tech.
Oh, thank you. There's a lovely comment that says, loving what I'm hearing. I'm going to pledge to do a health check on my data usage, and will delete all the emails and files and close accounts that I don't use anymore.
Excellent.
Maybe we should all do.
Yeah, I mean, and what would be great is if you did it before and an after, and then we could track it, and you say, well, look, I got rid of, 6 GB. And we can calculate that, how much CO2 you've actually saved in the process. So it would be wonderful in Salford if you could organise a spring clean, but before the spring clean, you did a record of how much do we have, and then after the spring clean, how much do we have now? That would be those would be nice figures to compare.
Oh, absolutely. And there's another question that says, plain text versus HTML emails? ? What do you think?
I mean, generally HTML is a very light language, so generally it doesn't create a lot of processing stress or other stress. It's really, but obviously plain text is a little better. It's I try and use plain text when I can. It's the images, unfortunately, that really have create the massive hike. So I'm not saying where. Here's an example of where images can really help the environment. In product, one of the reasons people return products is they feel they got the wrong product, or it wasn't as advertised, so to speak. So often 3 or 4 or 5 well shot product images from different angles showing the product can make increase the chances that the person buys the right product. So there's images really working to reduce a return, which a single return is much greater than the CO2 created by those 5 images. But silly images, like I've done a lot of work with governments with COVID-19, Canadian government, New Zealand government, lots of we did a COVID-19 top task, and I've been working in health space, digital space since 10 or 15 years. And around the time when swine flu came out, their websites were full of people sneezing and pictures and images, stupid images that were absolutely useless. You were worried, did you have the swine flu? And the first you saw this huge image of somebody blowing their nose because they felt they needed an image for the experience or something. Now today you go to Canada Health, you go to NHS, there's 0 images. There's 0 images, because what you want to know is symptoms. What you want to know is lockdown restrictions. So they've got rid of all the stupid images. So kill all the stupid images that absolutely add nothing to a page except weight. And keep good images and good videos that explain something really important about how you do this exercise, etc. But get rid of the vanity images, because they create far more weight than text does.
Another question's just come in. What do you find to be the biggest barrier in reducing digital waste and overconsumption? And is it more on the side of creators because of greed, innovation at all costs, or the users, e.g. lack of awareness or motivation?
I think the biggest thing is laziness. The biggest thing is this is hard work. And it's not even that it's hard work, it's boring work. You know, I talked to a professional photographer there a couple of years ago, and he said, I just got into this habit. After I do a shoot, I always allocate 15 to 20 minutes to immediately review my shoot. And I know if I've shot 100 photographs, I'm only going to keep 10, maximum of 15, absolute maximum 20, you know, before I do a detailed review. And ultimately, I might only keep 10 for every 100 I shoot. So if I don't do that immediately after my shoot, then I've got hundreds of images, you know, and then I don't want to do it. So I do it immediately. So getting into habits, good habits of, you know, rather than every year deleting all the emails. Like I try and keep my inbox at maximum of 30, and then I do clean up every year. I do, you know, I don't always do it right, but I've tried to. It's not easy. Even reviewing the website, taking old content and old pages, if you can get that into a regular behavioral pattern, this is boring stuff, but it really matters. And actually, it helps you in the long term. It means that now you've got 500 images that you actually like rather than 5,000 images. And then you don't look at them anymore because there's too much of an actual blur in the process. So it's not great dealing with waste when it is all piled up in a huge dump. It is much better to deal with it as you create it in the process. So if we can develop these good habits and awareness and get beyond our laziness, because technology is always telling us you don't have to bother, you don't have to, it's so convenient, it's free to store. Technology feeds the worst in our behaviors in many situations. So it's often resisting the designs that come out of Silicon Valley that are deliberately designed to engage us and create addiction behaviors in us. So it's a kind of standing back and developing new, more sustainable type habits that we have developed offline in how we deal with physical waste or how we deal with other behaviors. But as a general rule, hold on to stuff, get it fixed, and share. You know, same principles work offline as work online. You create a piece of content or a code. If somebody else uses that, you know, that is saved developmental energy. So you created something good, get other staff, promote it to other staff and the use. Then you're creating a circular economy, a digital circular economy, a sustainable economy.
I think there's so much more I can do individually, and we can do here at Salford as well. In this, it's fascinating. Another question's just come in, and then we'll move on to Beck. I've not forgotten about you, Beck. The reliance of the human race on digital technology is growing exponentially every year. Technology is not only increasing the carbon emissions, it is also proving detrimental to the well-being of the human race in terms of increased laziness, as you said, and increased isolation, to mention a few. Where and when will we stop?
Well, it's a great,
quite profound question.
It's the summary, you know, and we don't have to stop. You know, we don't, but we do have to, you know, pace ourselves and, you know, get in control of this rather than it being in control of us. You know, technology is driving us rather than we're driving technology. We think we're in control, but we're not. You know, we are addicts to these. I consider myself as one most of my life. You know, I change my computer every 2 years, never thought anything about it, you know, and I always wanted the highest spec and everything like that. I was as much change my phone every 2 years in the process. You know, so we use technology wisely. You know, drones can be used to plant trees in areas that humans can't get to, you know, can be used to intelligently plant trees, the right seedlings in the right spaces. So we can use technology in a way that can help us make better decisions for the preservation of species, etc. But we need to deliberately, consciously, culturally use it. If we just use default technology, it drives us towards wasteful behaviors. But if we get truly in control of technology and actually say, yeah, I'm going to make you work for the right things rather than the lazy things, or rather than the easy things, or rather than the convenient things, or the quote unquote free things in the process. I think technology can be a tremendous aid and support in creating a planet that is sustainable for life, for our children and their children to come. So, you know, it's not about not using technology, it's using it right. And sometimes not, sometimes sparingly, and saying, let's just go for a walk. You know, that's, you know, often the best things are, you know, because we're human. We are not computers, and we were designed as such. But used wisely, I think and it's your generation that needs to do it, you know, really, because, you know, for all sorts of obvious reasons. But, you know, use it wisely, and don't become a slave to it before really artificial intelligence, you know, becomes too dominant in our societies, which it probably will within 20 or 30 years if we don't significantly slow it.
I think I'd definitely be up for a walking meeting. Okay, shall we move on? Unless there's any more questions? No? Okay. So let's find out what we're doing here at Salford in terms of our digital waste. So next up, we've got Beck Bennett, as I mentioned before. She's the head of environmental sustainability, and she's really passionate about reducing Salford's operational environmental impact and helping our students and staff to respond positively to global challenges so we can all create a more sustainable world. So over to you, Beck.
Thanks, Rachel. And yeah, thanks, Gerry. That was so thought-provoking. And I think some of the issues have always been there in the back of your minds, but I think we're very good at keeping them in the back of our minds. So that was really good to get us thinking about particularly personal impact. Certainly for me, and I know there's lots we can do. And I've actually added to some of the presentation content that I was going to talk about as you were talking. So I'll just share my screen if I can. Just bear me a second. Okay. Just get the Teams group back. And I will turn my video off as well, bear in mind what we just heard.
Yeah.
So my original presentation, I was just talking about what we do with e-waste, but I've added in a bit now, a bit more about energy, from what Gerry was saying. So there's just so much opportunity that I think we have to improve at Salford. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do with the kind of the e-waste, the kind of physical e-waste, the electronic equipment that we have, and then also how much kind of energy we use as well. If I can get this to work. Okay, so a bit of an overview in terms of my role. I'm head of environmental sustainability, based in estates and facilities. We're quite a small team. Marta is on the call today as well. She's literally just joined the team last week. There's three of us, myself, Marta, and our energy manager. So we have just had approved our environmental sustainability plan. Now this is kind of pulling together all the work we've been doing. I've been at Salford for 11 years, so it's quite a bit of stuff we've already been doing, but putting it in context of net zero carbon and our newer targets, so updating those so that we're constantly driving to improve our performance. So over the last 10 years, we have reduced our carbon footprint for scope 1 and 2 carbon, so our direct emissions, by 65% since 2005-06 baseline. So we have been making quite a lot of progress, but particularly listening to Gerry today, there's such a lot of opportunity we've got, and we need to do that. So we have a target to get to net zero carbon by 2038, and that's in line with Greater Manchester commitments. So we have a lot of projects and a lot of things going on in all these different areas, which we've got on the slide here. We have an environmental management system to manage our impacts. We've got an energy, water and carbon management plan. We look at waste, obviously, travel and transport, how we build new buildings, how we refurbish buildings, what we buy, our green campus space. Communication and engagement is a really important element of our plan. So as well as our direct operational footprint, we recognise that we've got an opportunity here to influence all the students that come through Salford, you know, a big staff contingent who, you know, obviously impacts at home and in other roles and in future roles. So we recognise we have a responsibility and you know, an ethical responsibility there to do some education work. And then obviously we look at what we do in terms of our teaching, learning, research. So events like this are brilliant to support that. In terms of our environmental impact, this is from a couple of years ago now, but it gives you an idea of the level of impact. So we know that we consume this many kilowatt hours of energy, which is the equivalent of about 6,500 average 3-bed homes. In terms of waste, 660 tonnes a year of waste, about the equivalent of 120 African elephants, just to give you a context. Lots of paper use, obviously that's probably changed now, that'll have gone down this year. And water used as well. So this is a typical year, the sorts of impact that we're making. So this is our direct impact in terms of running that campus at Salford that we have. And I mentioned one of our key targets is that net zero carbon target. So you can see this is our impact from 2005-06 in terms of carbon emissions. So this is from direct emissions. This doesn't include things like people travelling to and from the university, doesn't include impacts from what we buy, the kind of other impacts, other carbon impacts of using energy, which is all classed as our scope 3. This is just our direct emissions. So this is what we're aiming for. This is where we've been. You can see we've been making good progress, but we've still got a to go to get to that 0 point by 2038. So this graph takes us to 2030, which we've got a target to reduce by 80% by 2030, and then to get to 0 by 2038. So some of the things that we're doing in terms of that footprint, obviously we have an energy, water, carbon management plan, which we're looking at buildings, making them more efficient. We're looking at the new buildings that are constructed at the moment, and green IT is part of that. Now we haven't got any we haven't got as much significant projects identified within green IT. So I think this is part of the opportunity that we have to address. And I think there's lots of things that, particularly from Gerry was saying about a raising awareness, that's going to really contribute towards that. So I think you mentioned that we don't have one filing cabinet now, we have 50 filing cabinets, and I think we've got 50 filing cabinets each within the university now. So that's the sort of level of information we've got. We'll send out attachments, people are saving their own version in different areas, but we have made progress with the sharing platforms now that, yes, they can use more energy, but we can certainly look at opportunities to use them much more efficiently than we do. And so I think that's going to be a role there for our team to engage better with IT, digital IT, to identify some of those opportunities and put out some guidance for those of us who are a bit ahead of the game that want to go ahead and start improving our impact in this area. And yes, to track that would be absolutely fantastic. So I want to see if we can look at our storage, how much space we're using at the moment. Can we do a bit of a campaign around it and then see what it's like afterwards? And the opportunity for a digital waste audit would be fantastic. So I'd love to explore that as well. Certainly, I think, as I said, there's so much opportunity there. We have a benefit, we are a small team already, so hopefully that is a positive for us to keep on track with that and take advantage of that. One project that we did identify recently, and we've been trying to implement for the last few years, is automatic shutdown of PCs. So that's switching stuff off. Again, very basic, but it's just so hard to implement sometimes. So we have a lot of PC suites on campus. Not all are in use at the moment. So we identified a good few years ago now that those were being left on. So we worked with IT to create an automatic shutdown. And again, things changed over the years, that kind of drops off. So redone that now and really pushed for that. So that's something that we are hopefully have implemented now. And it's something that we're tracking and audited at the moment to make sure that that's going ahead. So that basic stuff, and then the next stage will be to look at individual staff PCs, other students PCs that are not open access. So that's kind of where we are in terms of energy. In terms of the e-waste directly, this is just some information on how much we produce. This is the physical e-waste. So from old equipment, can be anything from AV equipment, PCs, laptops, all that sort of thing. So you can see it's pretty, and before 1718, it's been pretty similar. But again, you can see in the last year, we've had some big changes. A lot of AV equipment, we've had a lot of upgrades, significantly more e-waste has been produced the last year. And that's, again, a sign of change in working practices in the last year and those sorts of impacts. So, and I put on there how much was reused and how much was recycled. Positive is that a lot of that is reused rather than recycled. And what happens to our e-waste is that we use an organisation called Computer Disposals Limited. And that's we have a contract with them set up with IT. And the reason they were chosen is because they class everything they take off campus as assets, not waste. So they put everything through a functionality test. They prioritise reuse. It gets assigned to one specific engineer, each piece of equipment that goes in. So they are responsible for doing that functionality test, doing any tweaks to that to make sure that they can then prioritise reuse where they can. They estimate that about 70% of all the waste electrical items that they receive are actually remarketed, and then 30% are recycled in the UK. And if you look back at our figures, that's probably a little bit higher for us, which does say something about the good quality of the equipment possibly that we're disposing of. So it's something we do need to look at, and the amount we're classing as our waste. They do recycle everything within the UK. They send zero to landfill, and they have a commitment to not export any waste electrical equipment. So again, that's something that's quite important for us, and we possibly need to explore what they do export and just do some due diligence on that to check that what happens to it. But all the waste or recycled content does stay within the UK, which is a positive. So that's as much as I was going to cover. I'm happy to take any questions and talk about opportunities that we've got as well. But again, there's our contact details if you wanted to get in touch with us afterwards as well to ask any questions. But yeah, it was just very short and sweet. But yeah, I've got so much more now to look at. Thank you, Gerry. That was really interesting.
Oh, you're very welcome. Great to hear what you're doing, Beck. It's wonderful.